In today's video, I am going to explain anatomy of hip. In first part, I'm going to explain important anatomy. And on second part, I'm going to explain how you can apply today's anatomy for yoga and exercise. I want to focus on bony structure today. This is what I want to talk today. This is greater trochanter. Why am I focusing on greater trochanter today? Because there are numerous muscles attaching around greater trochanter. Plus, there are myofascial connection around greater trochanter. Let's go to closer view. This is closer view and slightly profile view, slightly from lateral view. Okay, as you see, there are many muscles around here. If there are a lot of muscles, you can say there are myofascial connection. That's very important. I want to focus on this muscle first. This is gluteus medius. Gluteus medius. And deep to gluteus medius, there is gluteus minimus. You don't see that. You see gluteus medius partially right here. This is gluteus minimus. Okay, these two muscles attach on greater trochanter. Let's go to function of gluteus medius and gluteus minimus. Okay, main function of these two muscles are hip abduction. Hip abduction. What is it? That's kind of a movement you bring leg to upward from lateral way. This is hip abduction. This is main function. Then you can divide these two muscles anterior to posterior, front to back. So when front part contracts, that brings hips to hip flexion. Hip flexion. Then when posterior part contracts, that brings hip to extension. Flexion and extension, completely opposite movement. Plus, if muscle can move hip joint, that can move pelvis. Which direction? That can bring pelvis to anterior tilt. That kind of rolling movement of pelvis that is going to front way, anterior way, okay? Anterior tilt. On the other hand, this way is posterior tilt. Posterior tilt. The pelvis kind of rolls posteriorly. If you look details of gluteus medius and minimus, you can see more movements, but these 5 movements are enough to understand how important these muscles are. I want to explain for exercise and yoga later, but think about it. There are no such a movement that doesn't require hip movements and pelvic movements. I say that again. Almost every single movement requires movement of hip and pelvis, right? Thus, when gluteus medius and gluteus minimus gets tight, that severely restrict movement of hip and pelvis. Now you see how important these two muscles are. Let's go to posterior part of greater trochanter. I want to focus on these tiny muscles. They are on posterior part of greater trochanter. There are 6 muscles on posterior deep part. They are called deep lateral rotators. Deep lateral rotators. Okay, as name of these muscles imply, main function is external rotation. External rotation. Plus, look at size of these muscles. They are slightly tiny. They are slightly thinner compared to gluteus medius and other big hip muscles, right? So when size of muscles get smaller and smaller, they have important role for joint stability. Joint stability, that's very important, right? Of course, these guys move hip joint. That's external rotation. But equally, joint stability is important because hip joint is very big that needs to sustain a lot of mechanical force that needs to move a lot for athletic movement. So hip joint requires both good movement and good stability. Thus, you cannot ignore importance of external rotators. Okay, this is on posterior part. And there is muscle attachment on inferior part. This muscle is not actually hip muscle. This is vastus lateralis. Vastus lateralis. This is part of quadriceps. So this is knee joint muscle. Function is, of course, knee extension. Knee extension. So if vastus lateralis gets tight, that affects for knee joint. It looks like not much effect for hip joint. There's relationship. As I said, if there are many muscles, that means there are myofascia. You can connect myofascial connection from vastus lateralis to deep hip lateral rotators and gluteus medius minimus. This is my personal experience. When I do myofascial release on inferior part of gluteus medius, then result is hip movement gets better. Of course, you can say same thing for other part. But I will say there is myofascial connection around greater trochanter. So if gluteus medius gets tight, that tightness can affect whole part of greater trochanter. Thus, that inhibits movement of hip and pelvis. Why pelvis? Because these muscles are from pelvis. That makes sense. So this is basic anatomy around greater trochanter. Now let me talk how you can apply this anatomy for yoga and exercise. Basically, these muscles are on lateral part of hip and slightly on posterior part. How can you apply that? This is famous yoga pose. This is triangle pose. Triangle pose. Her greater trochanter is about here, and her iliac crest, that's part of pelvis, is right here. Gluteus medius and gluteus minimus is about here. In this position, which is like kind of adduction position, gluteus medius and gluteus minimus are stretched out. Why? Because function of gluteus medius is hip abduction. This is opposite movement, adduction. Thus, gluteus medius, minimus are stretched out. Then, if you can rotate hip a little bit, maybe this internal rotation can affect for deep lateral rotators. Their function is external rotation. So if you do opposite movement, that may give stretch for external rotators. Does it make sense? So this kind of a side bending stretch, this sideways stretching can give stimulus for these muscles. Then you can do kind of self-care, self-treatment for muscles around greater trochanter. Triangular pose is not only the solution for releasing around greater trochanter. If you know anatomy and anatomy of yoga pose, you can apply many poses to stimulate around greater trochanter. This is just one example. Alright, this is for yoga pose. How can you apply anatomy for exercise? Alright, this is running. Running is basic exercise, right? His greater trochanter is about here. His left leg is on flexion position. His right leg is on extension position. So muscles around greater trochanter are working for 24 hours and 7 days in running movement. Say if you run too much, maybe gluteus medius, gluteus minimus gets tight, deep lateral rotators gets tight, vastus lateralis gets tight because that's knee extensor. So continuous movement, repetitive movement of lower extremity can tighten up these muscles. that may create adhesion around greater trochanter. That makes sense. So, solution. If you do self-care treatment around greater trochanter, I recommend you to work around greater trochanter. But caution is don't put self-treatment equipment on greater trochanter. I recommend you to work around greater trochanter because if you put something on bone directly, that hurts bony tissue. But around greater trochanter, there are muscle tissue, there are myofascia. So working around greater trochanter gives good effects for self-care treatment. I think this is kind of very informative. You can apply today's anatomy for yoga pose, of course for Pilates, and for self-care treatment. If you liked today's video, please hit the like button, comment and subscribe. See you next video.